Welcome back to another episode of With a Grain of Salt. I am your host, Isaiah Salter, and I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in for yet another week. Another WAGOS EP. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. I love y'all. And I'm really excited for this episode because this episode is on how nature has always been trying to teach us. I believe the title of the episode will be The Wisdom Hidden in Nature, or the wisdom that nature holds, something along them lines. I'm still figuring it out. But the reason that this episode even came about was because I was watching a podcast episode, and in the episode, the guy was explaining the story of the tortoise and the hare, and how, the hare is all about speed, but the tortoise moves intentionally, it's patient, and in the end, the tortoise ends up winning the race. The hare is moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour, constantly getting distracted, going from one point to the next point, this, that, all this stuff, and getting caught up in what everybody else is doing and what's going on and all this external stuff. And the tortoise is just moving in an intentional, patient pace. It's taking its time. It's controlling the things it has control over. It's not getting too caught up in all of the external noise. And it's just keeping that pace one step at a time. And it gets to exactly where it's meant to be. And so after hearing that analogy and that story, it really sparked my interest in other ways that nature, animals, all of it has lessons for us that we can take and apply directly to our lives. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. We're going to have 4 different points with 4 different analogies and ways that nature teaches us different lessons. So without any further ado, let's dive in. Point number 1, the lobster in discomfort. Growth requires outgrowing your shell. Lobsters grow in one of the strangest ways imaginable. Their shell protects them, but eventually it becomes too small. The very thing that once protected them starts restricting them. So the lobster has to hide under a rock, crack open its shell, leave it behind, and remain vulnerable until a new shell forms. That process repeats over and over throughout its life. There's such a deep lesson in that because a lot of us are trying to grow while staying comfortable. We want transformation without vulnerability. We want new lives while clinging to old identities. But growth will eventually make your current shell feel uncomfortable. Old habits, old relationships, old mindsets, old environments, old coping mechanisms. At first, comfort feels safe, but eventually comfort becomes confinement. At first, comfort feels safe, but eventually that same comfort can become confinement, right? If we're not willing to evolve and grow and leave things behind. The uncomfortable feeling you've been experiencing lately might not mean something is wrong. It may mean your soul has outgrown the version of life that you're currently living. And what's interesting is the lobster becomes most vulnerable right before it grows. That's how life works too. The moments where you feel uncertain, exposed, emotional, or stretched are often the moments right before expansion. That's so good. A lot of times the discomfort, the discontent that we are experiencing from life may not mean something is wrong. It may actually mean your soul has outgrown the version of life you're currently living. And when we are unwilling to move with that growth and evolve, which means letting go of certain things, removing ourselves from certain things, stepping away from certain things, shifting and changing certain things, and we want to stay in our comfort zone, we want to stay in the safety net of what's known, we hinder our ability to grow. So we need to be mindful of that, because just like the lobster has to let go of its shell and be in a very vulnerable state for a little bit in order for the new shell to grow, is the same way we have to be willing to step away from certain things, which may leave us in a vulnerable state because we're in unknown territory. But it's in that vulnerability where we're allowing for new possibilities and new opportunities to come into our life, new relationships to come into our life. A lot of people don't want to leave relationships because they don't want to be alone, not realizing that when you leave that relationship when you leave that person, when you leave that thing that isn't no longer aligned, is no longer for you, yes, you may have a period where you're alone and you're navigating a lot of uncertainty. But in that period, you're being developed. Things are being cultivated. And you're creating room and space for the right things to come in, for the right person to come in, the right relationships to come in. Right? But a lot of times we resist that period that we have to step into when we let go of something because it's very uncomfortable and we're in a vulnerable state. We're stepping away from, what's been safe and what's been known for so long, and we're stepping into uncertainty and unknown territory, and that's scary. But understand that fear isn't something you should run from. It's something you should lean into, right? The things that scare you the most are usually the things you should actually lean into the most. Fear is not the enemy. It's a signal. It's a guide. And when you reframe it as that, it's going to change how you navigate it. This is why perspective is so important. A lot of people are hindered simply because of their perception and perspective on the things that they experience. So if you are experiencing fear towards something and your perception of fear is negative, that is how you are going to navigate it. But when you shift your perspective, shift your perception on what these things are, guess what? It changes the way you experience it. So when I start understanding that fear is not the enemy, fear is a sign that I'm on the brink of transformation. I'm on the brink of growth. I'm on the brink of expanding who I am as an individual. When you understand that, you're not going to be so quick to avoid it, to run from it, to suppress it. Discomfort is often confirmation that growth is happening. Most people interpret discomfort as a sign to retreat, when oftentimes it's a sign you're evolving, right? Discomfort is often confirmation that growth is happening, because we understand that growth is not really a comfortable process. It requires shifting. It requires shedding. It requires letting go. It requires embracing uncertainty. So when we're feeling uncomfortable from having to do these things, we understand that, this discomfort that I'm feeling is because I'm growing, is because I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone. That's a good thing. And when you correlate it to a good thing, you're going to be way more willing to continue to take steps in that direction. This is why perspective is so important. You cannot become a new version of yourself while protecting every old version of yourself. Growth requires release. You cannot become a more aligned, authentic version of yourself until you are willing to let go of past versions of yourself. That's what growth is going to require of you. It's going to require you to constantly let go of who you are so you can step into who you're meant to be. And who you're meant to be changes as you grow. Different seasons require different versions of you. And if we're not willing to move with our own evolution, which means letting go of certain things or certain parts of ourselves, certain relationships, certain habits, certain mindsets, in order to step into something more aligned, if we're not willing to do that, then we're going to stay stagnant. We're going to stay stuck. And our ego is going to use a lot of different things to justify why we're not moving. But we need to be mindful of that. And we have to remind ourselves that, hey, growth is going to require me to lean into this discomfort. Growth is going to require me to lean into the fear. Growth is going to require me to embrace uncertainty. Growth is going to require me to step away from certain relationships. And I have to be willing to do that. Willing. That's the key word. Willing to do that. So much of your growth and evolution and success comes from how willing you are to do certain things. You may not know. It may be difficult, but are you willing to at least put yourself in that position? Are you willing to at least see what's on the other side of the fear? Are you willing to answer the call of your soul to let go of that habit or that relationship? Are you willing to do that? Regardless of all of these things that are happening and all of these things that your ego is trying to tell you to get you to not do it, can you still be willing to put yourself out there? The life you want often exists just beyond the comfort you refuse to leave. The life you want will often exist just beyond the comfort you refuse to leave. Hmm. Just like muscles tear before they grow stronger in the gym, your identity often gets stretched before your life expands. A lot of us are searching for all of these things from life, right? We want our life to look like this. We want our life to feel like this. We want to do these things and we want to experience these things. Yet, we're not willing to change. We want life to change, but we're not willing to change. A lot of people stay the same and are constantly hoping and wishing that their life changes, not understanding that life is just a reflection of you. When you change, life changes. When you change, life changes. And a lot of times, the change within yourself happens first before any change outside of yourself follows. A lot of people get so discouraged on their journey of growth or evolution, becoming more authentic and aligned. They get so discouraged because they feel like they're growing internally. They feel like things are happening, but there's nothing to show for it, right? This is like the analogy of bamboo. Bamboo grows underneath the ground for a very long period of time. And there's no visible growth. You cannot see the bamboo growing. You have no idea what's happening. From the outside perspective, it doesn't look like anything's happening. But underneath the ground, an extensive root system is being built. And that extensive root system is what allows the bamboo to sprout so high when it does and withstand the winds and the storms and the rain and all of that stuff because it has such a strong foundation. Because the whole time it looked like nothing was happening, so much was happening under the ground. And when bamboo shoots, it shoots incredibly fast up when it sprouts. It sprouts incredibly fast and incredibly high, right, in a very short period of time. But the first part of that process was all underneath the ground. And a lot of times in our journey, so much is happening within us before we see anything happen outside of us, right? And so many people can get discouraged because they don't feel like life is reflecting the growth that they feel internally, right? But do not base your growth on external things. Understand that growth is an internal thing. The external will follow your growth, but it's an internal shift, right? When you know it's time to step away from something or to begin something or to shift a certain area of your life, that knowing comes from something within you, right? That knowing comes from something within you. And that just goes to show that so much of our journey starts internally. The growth, the change, the evolution, that's an internal thing. And then it gets expressed externally, but it starts first internally. It starts first internally. A practice for point number 1 is ask yourself, what in my life feels too small for who I'm becoming? That's a great question to ask yourself. What in my life feels too small for who I'm becoming? Then identify one area where you know comfort has turned into stagnation, a habit, a routine, a relationship, a mindset, an environment. Choose one small action this week that represents stepping outside of that shell. That's huge. Maybe it's letting go of something, shifting your mindset, how you're showing up, whatever that may be. But what's one area in your life where you feel like, man, I'm getting a little stagnant. I'm leaning too much into my comfort zone. I need to take a step out of it. Challenge yourself in a very small way, like we always talk about. Start very, very small. Start very, very small. Point number 2, the eagle in the storm. Using pain as elevation. Most birds run from storms. Eagles use storms to rise higher. They lock their wings and allow the wind to lift them above the clouds. Wow. That's such a powerful metaphor for life because most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid discomfort, uncertainty, pain, rejection, loneliness, or failure. But often the very thing we're trying to escape is the thing capable of transforming us. Woo! Often the thing that we're trying to avoid, resist, or escape is the thing that will actually transform us into a better, more aligned version of ourselves. And we need to be like eagles. Most birds, they run from storms. Eagles use the storm to rise higher. Man, how can we use the experiences that we go through to help us and not hinder us? Perspective. right? When your perspective on the storm changes, guess what? How you navigate is going to change. When you have the perspective that most birds do, which is the storm is something we need to run from, that's exactly what you're going to do. But when you have the perspective of an eagle, you understand, hold on, I can actually use this storm for my benefit. Yeah, it may be uncomfortable, right? Rain coming, thunder, lightning, all of these things. But with it, within that same storm, there are winds that I can use to rise above it. And that's what the eagle sees. So the eagle literally embraces the storm, and it's through embracing the storm that it uses the storm to actually elevate. So when you start embracing the different seasons and struggles and experiences in your life with the right perspective, with the right mindset, with the right energy, you're going to start using these things, and these things are going to start helping you to elevate into a more aligned, authentic version of yourself, helping you to become more of who you were made to be. That's a blessing. Storms reveal us. They expose our attachments, our fears, our coping mechanisms, and our foundations. Anybody can feel aligned when life is easy, but when adversity shows up, you see who you really are. The people who grow the most aren't the people who have the easiest lives. They're the people who learned how to transmute pain into perspective. Sometimes your breakdown becomes awakening. Sometimes your isolation becomes clarity. Sometimes your loss becomes redirection. Come on. We need to learn how to transmute pain into perspective. The breakdown is preparing me for the breakthrough. The isolation is removing me from the noise so that clarity can arise. The loss is really just alignment. A lot of times, things being removed from our lives is actually alignment. If you view it through the eyes of the ego, you're going to see it as a loss. When you view it through the eyes of the soul, you're going to see it as alignment. Because alignment doesn't mean things coming into your life. It also means things leaving your life, right? Alignment is a process of stepping into, but also letting go, right? Letting go is alignment. Stepping into is alignment, right? There's things that we need to do that are aligned with where we need to go. And then there's things that we need to let go of that's aligned with where we need to go. I don't know if I worded that right. There's things that we need to do that are aligned with where we're trying to go. And there's things that we need to let go of that are no longer aligned with where we're trying to go, right? And letting go of them is alignment. Letting go of them is alignment. Come on. Pain often forces us to confront versions of ourselves we would have never addressed otherwise. Storms interrupt comfort but reveal truth, right? Adversity, challenge, setback often force us to confront certain parts of ourselves in our lives that we wouldn't have confronted if everything was fine, right? Because those challenges, those difficulties, those storms that come into our life, they disrupt the comfort that we've been in. But in that disruption, they reveal certain things that we need to tend to, certain things that we need to let go of, certain things that we need to embrace, certain things that we need to change. And with that perspective, it's going to help you to embrace the storms of your life, understanding that, no, these storms aren't here to break me down and belittle me. No, they're here to help me grow. And remember, like we talked about, the things that come into our life to help us grow don't always feel good. A lot of the things that are there to help us grow don't feel good when we're having to experience them. But with that understanding, we're going to be able to know that, hey, maybe I'm feeling some discomfort. I'm feeling resistance. But I know with this, there's growth. A practice for point number 2. The next time you go through something difficult, instead of immediately asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this trying to teach me? What part of me is this revealing? How can this refine me instead of harden me? Journal these answers honestly. I love that. Journal these answers honestly. Be honest with yourself. Radical honesty with ourselves. Radical honesty with ourselves. If we aren't honest with ourselves, how can we expect other people to be honest with us? Right? And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and it's kind of a side note, but learning to validate yourself, learning to be your biggest fan. Because if you don't validate yourself, you're going to search for that same validation from other people. That's a very unstable foundation to build your life on. When what you do is rooted in the validation of other people, it's going to be very up and down because people's validation is going to come and go. Sometimes people are going to validate you and sometimes people aren't. And if your foundation is built on getting the validation of other people, then when you're getting validation, everything's going to be good. When you're not getting validation, you're going to crumble, right? And this is why you need to learn to validate yourself so that you can relinquish your attachment or need to be validated from others because you're good within you. Validate yourself. Become your biggest fan. Become your best friend. So often we search for these things from other people, but we need to start within ourselves. How can I learn to validate myself? How can I learn to show myself the love that I've been so willingly showing to other people? How can I learn to fill up my cup instead of always pouring into everybody else and depleting myself in the process? And that's something that I'm really working on. How can I learn to validate myself? Become your biggest fan. Support you. Right? Support you. Point number 3, the caterpillar and the butterfly. We've talked about this plenty of times, but it's always something we should come back to. The pain of becoming. One of the craziest things about transformation is that the caterpillar completely dissolves inside the cocoon before becoming a butterfly. It literally breaks down into something unrecognizable before reforming into something new. Ooh, that's beautiful. That's how transformation feels in real life too. People glamorize growth, but becoming a new version of yourself can feel lonely, confusing, and disorienting. You start losing attachment to old habits, old identities, old environments, old relationships. There's this in-between stage where you're no longer resonating with the things of the past, but you haven't fully stepped into, your new self yet. And this space can be incredibly uncomfortable because the ego interprets uncertainty as danger. But the cocoon is sacred. A lot of people interrupt their own transformation because they mistake discomfort for failure. They run back to familiar patterns because the unknown feels vulnerable. But if the caterpillar never surrendered to the process, it would never discover it had wings. We want to become butterflies, but we don't want to go through the process of being in the cocoon. If the caterpillar never had the courage and the willingness to go into the cocoon and go through that process, it would never be able to discover that it actually has wings and can fly and can turn into something even more beautiful. And that's something that we can apply to in our lives. Yes, in stepping into this process, there's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be challenge. There's going to be discomfort. You're going to have to let go of certain things. But when you see where it leads you, there will not be an ounce of regret. But if you constantly avoid putting yourself out there, you constantly avoid growing and changing, you constantly avoid letting go of things that you know you need to let go of that are holding you back, you constantly avoid discomfort, then what's on the other side of that is a life of staying small and having a lot of regret. And you really need to ask yourself, you really need to sit yourself down and be radically honest. Look 5, 10, 15 years into the future and ask yourself, what do you want the conversation with yourself to be 5 years from now? Do you want it to be, man, what if? I should have. I wish I had of. Whoa. Or do you want it to be, man, I'm so happy I made that decision. Man, I'm so grateful that I went through that. And I'm so proud of myself for embracing that season of my life and having the willingness to let go or step into. Which conversation do you want to be having with yourself, right? You need to bring that into this moment, reflect on it, take the necessary steps with compassion and grace for yourself, but think about that. Transformation requires old versions of yourself ending for more aligned versions of yourself emerging. That's what transformation is going to require. Transformation is going to require you to release outdated old versions of yourself. And sometimes releasing outdated old versions of yourself means releasing the relationships and attachments and habits that were tied to that version of you. Think of a hot air balloon. In order for a hot air balloon to rise to the level it can rise to, it has to be willing to let go of the weights holding it down. Right? A lot of people want to rise while still holding on to all of this stuff. But so much of you elevating to a more aligned, authentic version of yourself is going to come from releasing the weight of the things that no longer serve you, that cannot go to where you're going. And letting go of things is not a negative thing. It is a natural part of life. It is a natural part of life. And we have to be willing to move with the natural rhythm of life. A lot of people, the reason that they feel so disconnected, they feel so off, right? They feel so down is because they're going against the natural flow of life. They're going against the natural flow, right? The natural flow is growth, evolution, things coming in, things going. We have to allow that natural flow to move in us and around us. Becoming will cost you your comfort, but staying the same will cost you your life. Snakes shed their skin because old skin eventually restricts growth. Imagine trying to grow while clinging to what no longer fits you. Letting go, learning to let go. I mean, it's something that you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. Letting go is a never-ending process of life. You're always going to have to learn how to let go. So embrace letting go, right? And it's all about perspective. When you view letting go through the right lens, you're going to be a lot more willing to do it, right? When you view letting go through the wrong lens, you're going to be a lot more hesitant to do it. Just like everything else in life. So we're going to view letting go as shedding the skin that no longer aligns, creating room for the right things to come in. Letting go of the weights that have been holding my hot air balloon to the ground so that I can fly. Come on. So that I can fly. That's a blessing. A practice for point number 3 is write down some habits you've outgrown, some beliefs that no longer align, environments that are draining you more than fulfilling you, relationships that are contracting, not expansive. And then ask, what would happen if I finally released these things? What would happen if I finally stepped away from this? And go through that thought exercise with yourself, right? In that journal session, really write that down and ask yourself, what do you think would happen if you let go of that habit? What do you think would happen if you let go of that relationship? What do you think would happen if you really stepped away from this version of yourself? Write it down. Sit with yourself in that process. And point number 4, the last point of the day. The spider rebuilding its web, learning how to begin again. I like this. A spider can spend hours building a web only for it to be destroyed in seconds by wind, rain, or a passing human. But the spider doesn't sit there defeated, questioning its worth. It simply begins rebuilding again. Humans struggle with this. We attach our identity to outcomes. So when something falls apart, relationships, careers, routines, dreams, momentum, whatever it may be, we internalize the collapse as proof that we have failed. But life will constantly ask you to rebuild. Rebuild your confidence, rebuild your health, rebuild your faith, rebuild your discipline, rebuild your heart after disappointment. The strongest people are not the people who never fall apart. This is important. The strongest people are not the people who never fall apart. They're the people who learned how to start over without losing themselves. You will face many defeats, but you must never become defeated. Maya Angelou. Your ability to restart is more important than your ability to avoid failure. Everybody falls, not everybody rebuilds. That's so true. Everybody gets knocked down. Everybody fails in life. But not everybody gets up. Not everybody tries again. And that's a big distinguishing factor between people who grow and evolve and step into amazing things and people who stay stagnant and stuck. When I get knocked down, when things don't go the way that I expected, when life hits me with a corkscrew, how do I navigate those times? Fall down 7 times, get up 8. Fall down 100 times, get up 101. And you have to make that commitment to yourself. We mentioned this in a couple episodes ago. The path may not always be clear, but your ability to walk it should be. Right? Life may not always be clear, but your ability to handle whatever comes into your life, that's where your power is. That needs to be very clear. No matter what happens in my life, I trust myself to handle it. I trust myself to navigate it, no matter what it is. Resilience is not hardness. True resilience is softness that survives destruction without losing its essence. That's good. I like that. I never heard that. That's fire. Resilience is not hardness. True resilience is softness that survives destruction without losing its essence. As long as you could begin again, you are never truly defeated. Like we said, you will face many defeats, but you must never become defeated. Defeated is like a defeated mindset, a defeated perspective is just like, this is what it is. It can never get better. I'm no good. It's just my luck. Nah. Heck nah. We not taking that on. We're not conforming to that ideology. No, sir. No, sir. A practice for point number 4 is think about one area of your life where you feel like you have fallen off. Instead of overwhelming yourself with rebuilding everything at once, ask what is one small action that would represent beginning again today. Then do that immediately after this podcast ends. And that really resonates with me, especially point number 4, because I feel like I'm in a season of my life where I'm having to rebuild a lot of different things in my life. And it's not a bad thing, right? Rebuilding is not a bad thing. A lot of people view rebuilding as, oh my gosh, I'm starting over. I'm starting from scratch. No, you're starting from wisdom. Understand that you are starting from wisdom. You are starting from experience. It's way different than starting from square one. So remind yourself of that. But I really enjoyed this episode because I love looking into how nature, reflects life, how nature mirrors life, and how we can learn from all of these beautiful things that are around us. We can learn from all of these things that are on this earth that we are inhabiting. So, yeah, pretty chill, cool, different type of episode. But y'all know how we get. We just keep it authentic, whatever we feel for that week. That's what we do. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of the With a Grain of Salt podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. I love each and every one of you. And remember, most importantly, to take everything with a grain of salt. I will see you guys next week. Deuces.